Amen. All right, well, we are back tonight in our series through the book of Ecclesiastes. And really what we're going to hit at tonight is, to encompass it in one word, is this word paradox. Tonight will be about a certain paradox. And if you don't know what a paradox is, this is just dictionary.com's definition of what a paradox is. A paradox is a seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statement or proposition that when investigated or explained may prove to be well-founded or true. So really what a paradox is something that at first glance doesn't seem like it might be true if you just hear it for the first time, but in fact it really is. So we're going to study this paradox tonight in Ecclesiastes chapter 11 that has a blueprint for what you and I need to do with our lives when it comes to work. Everyone in this room is going to do a lot of working in their life. Lots of you are working right now on schoolwork, on homework, on chores. Some of you work jobs, you have different jobs that you're clocking in and clocking out of. We are all going to do a lot of work in our lives. And Ecclesiastes is going to teach us tonight this paradox, that to work like a Christian, you must work hard and rest at the same time. You have to work hard and you have to rest in God specifically at the same time. Not rest in terms of you need to sleep, you need to have your enough time off of work, but when you work hard, you need to be resting in God at the same time. So I'd love for you guys to open up to Ecclesiastes chapter 11. We're going to see this paradox play out in Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verses 1 to 6 this evening. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verses 1 to 6, as we really investigate what it means for us to work like a Christian, to work hard and also to rest and to trust in God at the same time. If we're going to do a lot of working in our life, then we need to figure out how we should do that accordingly, which I think is very helpful that Ecclesiastes 11 lays out exactly how we should work. So Ecclesiastes chapter 11, let's read verses 1 through 6. We'll do what we always do. We'll break it down. A lot of Ecclesiastes takes a lot of translating into plain English what is being said. So break it down together. Ecclesiastes chapter 11, starting in verse 1. Ecclesiastes 11 verse 1 says, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. Give a portion to 7 or even to 8, for you know not what disaster may happen on earth. If clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it will lie. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. For as you do not know the way of the Spirit that comes to the bones of the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. In the morning sow your seed, and at the evening withhold not your hand, for you do not know which will prosper, this or that, whether both alike will be good." What did he just say there? That was a lot of illustrative and analogous language. And what did he just say here? Well, in a nutshell, as we are trying to hit at all of tonight, this paradox of to work like a Christian, you must work hard and rest at the same time. It was a couple weeks ago when we were in Ecclesiastes chapter 10, but Ecclesiastes chapter 10 basically laid out how foolish it is to live like a fool. And I know that sounds like a dumb statement, but it really explains how foolish it is to live your life as a fool. And so what he does here in chapter 11, he transitions back to how are you going to live wisely? See, he supplies the reader with tools to live a wise life. We've talked a lot about in Ecclesiastes. We've talked about money. We've talked about work ethics. We've talked about family. We've talked about a lot of different topics. And tonight he really lays out for us to be working hard and to trust God at the same time. And so really what he's trying to do is he's trying to take this concept that he's been hitting at all throughout the book, Ecclesiastes of wisdom, how to walk wisely, and he applies it specifically to someone in their investments, someone in their work, and for you guys tonight, when you have homework, how you can apply wisdom into real life. The Bible teaches us, Ecclesiastes 11 teaches us that when you work, you need to work with wisdom. So you can write it on this way for point number 1. Point number 1, be someone who works wisely. Be someone who works wisely. Be someone who works wisely. Working wisely can be something that you as a Christian can do, but also it can be something that a non-Christian can do. And Ecclesiastes chapter 11 here is going to teach you specifically as a Christian what it means for you, very specifically for you to work wisely. He gives us a couple things for us to do. If you look back at verse 1, He talks about bread and he talks about water. He lays out what it looks like for someone to work with a type of wisdom, with a type of diligence. Ecclesiastes 11 verse 1, it says, "Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days." At first reading, that sounds like this verse is telling you to go out to a body of water and just throw a bunch of bread in it, and then eventually the bread's going to circle around the lake or river or something like that, and it's going to come back to you after many days. That's not really what he's trying to say. What he is saying is that work is often associated with this type of risk and this type of patience. So when you work as a Christian, you are patient upon God and what God will do. So casting your bread upon the waters is this idea of these traders, these people that were trying to make money, to put their grain, put their bread on a boat that they would just send out to go get transferred, to get sent off to somewhere. And I want you to think about way back, long time ago, before tracking numbers were a thing. Before tracking numbers were a thing, when you put your grain or your bread or your crops on a boat, truthfully, you had no idea what was going to happen. And so what he's saying here is that there's this very wise thing for a Christian to do, where you are trusting in God of what God is going to do. You're not, we're going to see here in verse 2, that you're not being foolish with your type of work, trying to be controlling or micromanaging with your type of work. You look back at verse 2, it's talking about this idea of putting your bread, putting your crops on a boat and letting it go away, and then trusting that it will eventually come back to you. Verse 2 says, "Give a portion to 7 or even to 8, for you do not know what disaster may happen." So what he's telling his audience to do is, thinking about trading crops and stuff like that, he would say, send it out on a boat and trust God that he's going to take care of you. But then also, he says, put it on about 7 or 8 different ships, so that if that one ship that you put all of your money in, all of your grain in, and it sinks or something like that, you won't be left poor and having nothing to show for it. So basically what he's trying to say here, you can write down for subpoint A of how to work wisely as a Christian. Subpoint A is, don't be stupid with your investments. Don't be stupid with your investments. And I'm going to explain what I mean by investments here in a minute. I don't just mean money. Subpoint A, point of 1, don't be stupid with your investments. There's this risk associated with marine commerce, with putting your stuff out on ships. The NIV translates verse 1, instead of cast your bread upon the waters, NIV says ship your grain across the sea so that you might receive a return. So there's this very clear indication that you are trading your stuff so that you trust God that you'll receive this return eventually. And so there's this idea of a Christian to have patience when they work. Patience when they work. The wise person has to make risks. They can't control every detail, and I'll get in just a minute what that means for you and your schoolwork specifically. But I want you to think about a job. I want you to think about even making money, because that's the context that he's talking about here, making money. Maybe you've heard this old saying that to make money, you have to spend money. Sometimes a phrase that is tossed around is scared money, don't make money. You have to pay money to be able to make some sort of money in return. If you've ever seen this show on TV called Shark Tank before, where these investors, where these entrepreneurs, these inventors will come bring a product to these sharks, these investors with multi-millions of dollars, what they'll do in the Shark Tank is they'll say, hey, I've invented this certain product, and it's going to change your life, and it's going to do lots of good things. And these sharks will always ask the same question to everyone who walks through the doors. They will say, how much money have you invested in this product? Before I'm going to drop, $1 million to help you invest in your product, how much money have you invested? When people say, oh, I haven't really spent that much money on this, I'm looking for your money. Every single time they'll say, I'm out, I don't want to do business with you. I want to do business with people that are willing to take risks and to spend money. To do something well, to make money, you have to do some sort of spending money. I'm not a huge Christmas fan around Christmas time, and I know that was one of my hot takes a couple weeks ago. And what I really don't like about Christmas is the obligation that we all have to go take Christmas pictures. And Christmas pictures, when I was a kid, people would do it for my family for free. But now as an adult, I don't know if you guys realize this, maybe because you're not organizing Christmas pictures, you have to pay people to do Christmas pictures. So something that you don't want to do, like take a Christmas picture, you have to pay someone else to do it for you, which for me it's just baffling that you would pay someone to take pictures of you and then to just send you digital copies of it later. But basically what these photographers will do, why they charge so much money, is because their cameras that they have are way better than your iPhone cameras. They've spent thousands and thousands of dollars on camera and on filtering software. And the idea is you pay them money because they have invested a lot of money in their equipment so that they can use it to then make more money. So there's this very basic financial economic situation going on here in Ecclesiastes chapter 2 or chapter 11 verses 1 and 2. But what does it mean for you today? Because a lot of this conversation about money, about verse number 2, making sure that it's on different ships. Maybe you've heard the term diversifying your portfolio. When you go invest in stocks, you don't just put all of your money into one stock and then that stock crashes and then you have no money. You spread it out a bunch of different places. So what does that mean for us specifically? You're not investing in stocks. I'm assuming, maybe some of you are a little bit. You're not spending your life savings on certain investments right now, or you don't have a business maybe per se. So how does this specifically apply to you? I want you to look back at verse 2 here. This idea of diversifying your portfolio, making sure that you're not putting all of your, we'll say, eggs in one basket. Because really that's what verse 2 is telling you to do, to not put all of your eggs in one basket. So I want you to think about investment. I had you write down for point number 1 about, or sub-point A rather, to not be stupid with your investments. What kind of investments do you make today in your life stage? Your life stage, you are probably investing a lot of time, a lot of attention, a lot of, oftentimes, obsession to certain things. And Ecclesiastes chapter 11 here is saying, don't obsess over one thing and get all of your attention, all of your eggs into one basket. So you can spend your teenage years focusing and obsessing all of your time, all of your attention, all of your talent in your life to one certain thing in life. One, maybe you could say hobby, one sport, maybe for you it's grades, maybe for you it's just being a good person, spending all of your time and attention, your mental capacity, obsessing over one thing. If you guys know the Bible well enough, you know there's a word for that. It starts with an I, idol. The Bible talks about an idol. It talks about you obsessing all of your attention and making the most important thing in your life, anything other than God, and obsessing over one thing. The Bible says that is a very bad, a very dangerous thing to do. And right now, I know you probably hate hearing this, and you've heard this so many times. Right now, in your life stage right now that you're in, you have more time than you'll ever have for the rest of your life until you're maybe retired. You have so much time right now. And you have an opportunity to invest that time in things that actually matter. If you don't invest every ounce of your energy into your grades, what happens at the end of graduation? All of your grades mean absolutely nothing, and you just go on to the next thing and go on to the next thing. You show up to an interview at a job one day, and no one's going to ask your GPA. No one cares about your GPA. You spend all of your time and attention to a certain video game, and you spend all of your attention to it, and then what's that going to get you if you're really good at a video game or a sport or a hobby? You obsess over one thing, you make it your ultimate goal, and you can go very dangerous places. And I know I've shared this story many times about me in high school obsessing a lot of my attention, not all of my attention. I would not say it was an idol, but I spent so much time playing golf back in high school. So I just took different screenshots. I went on my phone today and I just looked. I've got 2011, 2012, 2013, which actually that picture right there of me in the backyard, that was actually Karina's that was our first date. That was right after after our first date, I went home and I would continue to practice to grind, because that's just what you do. 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015, I'm doing the same thing over and over again, investing so much of my time, so much of my energy into golf. And I did a lot, and I maybe have some awards to show for it, some trophies to show for it. But ultimately, what did all of this equal? Go to the next slide, and I'll show you what all of this equaled. That, right there. All of that time, all of that attention, and you know what? I played golf on Monday. I'm trash. I'm so trash now. I'm so bad. And you know what? It means nothing now. Absolutely nothing. 2011, 2012, all the way back to when I was a little kid, like Levi's age, whacking golf balls over and over again. The payoff of all of that time and energy is ultimately nothing. You could do it in sports, you could do it in video games, you could do it in your grades, you could do it in whatever hobby you have, even in an instrument. Lots of things that are good. Golf is not a bad thing, instruments are not a bad thing, video games are not necessarily a bad thing. But if you are spending all of your time and obsession, putting all of your eggs into one basket, Ecclesiastes chapter 11 says you're living like the fool. You're not living like the wise person. You're spending all of your time into obsessing over one thing, and if it's not God, then it's ultimately going to leave a giant void. Maybe you've seen this sentence before, but I want you to really truly fill in the blank to this sentence right now. You love blank with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. That sentence right there, truthfully, when you think in your heart of hearts as you go to sleep at night, as you stare up at the ceiling before you go to bed, what are you really filling in that blank? What are you really filling in that blank? I don't think this surprises anyone. This is Matthew 22. When Jesus is asked, what is the greatest commandment? He says that you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your mind. With everything that you are you fully invested in loving the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength? Is God really your number one, or is he just a side gig, a side hustle? You think right now, if God could make you perfectly proficient in whatever hobby, whatever GPA you want, whatever even job, money that you can make, if God could let you have all of that, would you rather have that than being more godly, than loving the Lord your God with all of your heart, soul, mind, and strength? If God could give you the whole world, but you didn't love God, would you really, really take that? Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 2 tells you to diversify your portfolio, to diversify where you are focused in life, your attention. But also verse 1, it says, cast your bread upon the waters and you'll find it after many days. Maybe you're not someone that obsesses over one thing. Maybe you have a quote-unquote diversified portfolio in terms of the different things that you have in life, of where you're investing your time and your energy. Well, verse 1 here describes this idea of casting your bread upon the waters, for then you'll find it after many days. There's this idea of you being a patient person when it comes to what you're investing your time into. I think so many of you can grow so impatient with certain things, and you're the kind of person that has had like 30 different hobbies in your life because you try something and then you just quit and you give up. You try something, you quit and you give up. You try something, you quit and you give up. Verse 1 here is telling us that we don't just try something and just give up when it doesn't happen as fast as we want it to. I think in our world we always expect instant results. We expect instant results, and if we don't see instant results, then we just move on and we quit. But as a Christian, someone that's supposed to live wisely, someone that is really truly working wisely and not being stupid with their investments, is someone that should be known for their discipline, for their patience, for their consistency, for their diligence, and not just doing something, trying it, and giving up. Colossians chapter 3, verse 23 and 24 says, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive an inheritance of your word, for you are serving the Lord Christ. A Christian worker is disciplined despite the results, despite the circumstances, because of this right here. They are working ultimately for the Lord. When you are working on your quote-unquote golf swing, when you are working on your homework, when you are working at whatever instrument you play, and you are focusing your attention on it, is your focus and your mindset to do this for myself? Or is your mindset truly, I am doing this as though I'm working unto the Lord? A Christian worker is disciplined and working ultimately for something much higher than himself, much higher than his accomplishments or his accolades. This applies to sanctification, but Galatians 6:9 says, let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. We're not disciplined for 5 minutes and then we move on and we give up. Do not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. I think that applies very, very well to something like Bible reading. Do you just do it for a couple days and you just give up? You grow weary of doing good because you don't believe that in due season you will reap if you don't give up? A Christian worker, when it comes to schoolwork, when it comes to your future job, when it comes to even your chores, is someone that is disciplined, not just for 5 minutes, but is consistently, diligently disciplining themselves, working unto the Lord. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. There's this relinquishing to trusting God in his plan. Look down at verse 6 here with me. Verse 6, Ecclesiastes chapter 11, verse 6 says, in the morning sow your seed, and at evening withhold not your hand. For you do not know which will prosper, this or that, whether both alike will be good. The idea here of this person that is working hard for the Lord, they are in the morning sowing their seed, and at evening withholding not their hand. They're working diligently. Subpoint B, if you're going to be a godly Christian worker, subpoint B is this: give yourself to hard work. Give yourself to hard work. And I word it like that: giving yourself to hard work is you are fully devoted, fully committed, fully resolved to say, I am not going to be a lazy person. I am going to work hard, whether it is my hobby, whether it is my instrument, whether it is my grade. So this is the other side of the road. If you're a lazy person, then you should listen up to this and say, I need to give myself for hard work. Verse 6, this idea of sowing in the morning and withholding not our hand in the evening, is this idea that we're working hard at all times of the day. For you do not know which will prosper, this or that, whether both alike will be good. That's kind of the idea of verse 2, of making sure that you're diversifying, if you will, your portfolio. But really what he's trying to say is, because we don't know the future, we're working hard in every area that God has placed in our life. Whether it is your home life, whether it is your school life, whether it is your church life, whether it is you serving, on Thursday nights at Foundations or on the weekend, whatever you do, you are doing it with all of your might. You're not being a lazy Christian, because truthfully, a lazy Christian is a contradiction in terms. A lazy Christian there's no such thing. A Christian is a hard-working person that is diligent, committing himself to obeying God by working heartily for the Lord. You can turn over just a couple pages to the left to Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6 is a great one for us to look at as we're thinking of this concept of working diligently. Proverbs chapter 6, verses 6 through 11. Proverbs 6, verses 6 through 11 really should hit you right between the eyes, right in the forehead, if you are someone that struggles with laziness. If you are a lazy person, listen right here to Proverbs chapter 6, verses 6 through 11. Proverbs 6, verse 6. It says, Go to the ant, O sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief, officer, or ruler, she, referring to the ant, prepares her bread in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. How long will you lie there, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. If you are a lazy teenager, I need you to wake up and see that that's actually a big deal. During your teenage years, you can be lazy, and it's culturally acceptable. Oh, it's just what, teenage boys, they just sleep in till 1 p.m. on a Saturday. That's just what they do. You are a lazy teenager that you need to consider the ant. Go to the ant, O sluggard, and it says, consider her ways. The Bible is telling you here, you should look up to an ant. The ant is a better, more hardworking person than you are. Consider her ways, imitate her ways. Look at this, verse 7 and 8. It says that she's doing all of this without someone telling her to do this, without having a chief, an officer, or a ruler. This ant is preparing bread in the summer, gathering food in her harvest. The idea is no one's telling the ant what to do. They are self-starting, working hard, not being lazy, doing what they need to do. How long will you lie there, O sluggard? Oh, sluggard is the word for lazy person. How will you lie there? How long will you lie there, O lazy person? When will you arise from your sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed man. I don't want you to just see laziness as a phase that you might just be lazy during your teenage years and you'll just grow out of it. You will never grow out of laziness if you don't put your attention focused to kill that specific sin. You're not just going to grow out of it one day because you're just going to wake up one day and be a diligent, hardworking person. Laziness is not a phase thing. It's a sin thing that you need to put to death. And asking yourself, why am I lazy? Is it because I'm selfish? It's because I love to sleep? Is it because I'm staying up late playing video games all night or talking to my friends all night, and now I'm lazy because of my poor decisions? I want you to look at Ephesians 5, verse 15 and 17. 15 through 17. It says, Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise. Look at how does the wise person walk wisely? It says this, by making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. I want you to think about your homework. Look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise. Are you making the best use of the time? Are you staying up late and not making the best use of the time and and committing evil things in the middle of the night because you're just so lazy, walking as unwise. Maybe you have bad grades because you don't do your homework. Maybe you should plan out your afternoons better. Maybe sometimes you miss CSM because you have too much homework. Well, maybe you should plan ahead, and maybe you should think more carefully about how you orient your week and your afternoons and your homework. Maybe not hanging out at lunch, but maybe doing your homework at lunch, planning ahead, looking carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise. You need to see that your laziness is a big deal before God. You ultimately, if you are calling yourself a Christian, you're a lazy person. You're misrepresenting who God is. God has called you not to be lazy, but has called you to look up to the ant and say, I'm going to work hard. In the words of our text, in the morning sow my seed, in the evening withhold not my hand, working as diligently as I can, disciplining myself because I'm ultimately working for God. I'm not working for a paycheck. I'm not working for a grade. I'm not working for a first place trophy for my sport. I'm not looking to ultimately do those things for myself, but I'm ultimately working for God. You misrepresent God when you're being lazy. Okay, great. Well, you could go home, and a lot of you could go kick yourself into gear and go just start working hard. But like I said earlier, where's the God aspect of all of this? I just said earlier that a non-Christian person can work wisely, can do some of these things, can work hard. Some of the hardest working people are not actual Christians that don't have the Holy Spirit living inside them. So what should you do? I want you to remember this paradox that we talked about at the beginning, that to work like a Christian, you have to work hard and rest in God at the same time, putting your trust in Him. And so this is the aspect specifically for you as a Christian. Point number 2, you can write it down this way. You need to be someone who trusts God. Be someone who works wisely, and then be someone who trusts God. We will look back at verse 3 here when you finish writing that down. Be someone who trusts God. To work like a Christian, you must work hard and rest in God. Resting in God doesn't mean that you don't work hard, but it does mean that your hope is ultimately not in yourself. You are ultimately working hard because you're resting your future and your life in God. Let's look back at verse 3 here with me. It talks about clouds, and it talks about rain, and it talks about a random tree falling in the forest. What are we talking about here? Verse 3, it says, if the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves on the earth. Sounds very basic. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in that place where the tree falls, there it will lie. That seems like another very obvious statement. If a tree falls, then that's where it falls. Verse 4, he who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. As you do not know the way that the Spirit comes to the bones in the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. There's this idea that you need to trust your life in God and work hard, work discipline with that ultimate trust in what God is doing through your work. Again, back to the idea of not working for yourself, not getting grades for yourself, not being good at a sport for yourself, but doing it ultimately trusting in God. So how do we actually do that? This whole concept of this rain and clouds and tree falling down, what is the point of this here? Well, the point of it here is really that you cannot control the future. There are so many things in life that are inevitable. There's so many things in life that are random, trees falling this way or that way. So what you need to do is trust in God. So you write down this way for subpoint A is you need to let go of your control of the future. Really what he's trying to explain here is that you have very limited control in what goes on in this world. To be someone who trusts God, you need to let go of your control of the future. A very basic thing in verse 3, but it's a very obvious in that you cannot control the rain. You cannot control the clouds. When a cloud is full of rain, it starts raining. When a tree falls to the south or to the north, that's where it falls. There are these things in life that you cannot control that are inevitable. These trees that are falling in different ways, it's random. The point of it is that there are so many things in life that are outside of your control, but they are in God's control. And therefore, you need to put your trust in God for whatever you do in your life. This theological concept of the providence of God. The providence of God is this. For the definition on the screen, but it's this idea that God having the whole world in his hands. The providence of God, just textbook definition here, is God's preserving of his creation, operating in every event in the world, and directing the things in the universe to his appointed end for them. The idea here is that God has everything in your life in his hands, and you as a Christian worker, as someone that is doing homework as a Christian, you are entrusting what happens on the other side of your hard work to God. You're trusting your future in who God is. This song, He's Got the Whole World in His Hands, is not just a song for little kids to sing, but it's a very adult truth that you need to believe that your future is in God's hands. Because I bet you that there are people in this room that try to put their future into their own hands. They try to control the future in their own hands. You think you have your life planned out. You've got, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to go get a scholarship here, and then I'm going to go to this school, and then I'm going to get this job, and then I'm going to go this place, and I'm going to make this much money, and I've planned it all out. I've looked at it all up on the internet. I know what I'm going to do. I have my life set before me. Some of you are not the lazy person. Some of you are the hardworking person, and you get overconfident in your plan for your life. You've tried to control your life. You can write down James chapter 4. James chapter 4, verses 13 through 16. You don't need to turn there with me, but I'm going to read it for you real quick. James chapter 4, verse 13 through 16 says this: "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit, yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance." James chapter 4 is telling you that if you think you have your future laid out and all put together in your overconfidence, he says then bad things are going to happen. Your overconfidence, God is going to ultimately humble you one day. It says the solution here is to entrust your future to God. There's that saying there in that text that the person says, if the Lord wills. What is that statement? That's a statement of trust that God, whatever happens in life, you are in control of it. What you need to do is understand what your role is and what your role is not. Your role is not to be God, is not to control your future. Your role is to work hard and entrust your future to God. Okay, great. Well, that might hit some of you, but some of you, it doesn't hit you. Well, look at verse 4 here with me. This might hit you. You might be a person that works hard. You might be a person that is not lazy. You might be a person that does their spiritual disciplines and loves God and tries to obey God and work heartily for the Lord. You're someone that doesn't try to necessarily control the future, but maybe you're this person. Verse 4, it says, "He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap." What he's trying to describe here in verse 4 is that you aren't productive if you are so focused on what's going to happen in the future. You're not the one trying to control it, but you are very anxious about what is going to happen. Some of you are very anxious people, and you worry about the future. You don't try to control the future, you try to worry about the future. You're anxious about the future. What this is telling you here is that you're just as bad as the lazy person. It's just as sinful because your trust is not in God, your trust is in yourself, and you're anxious. We don't have time to turn there. I wish we did, but you can write down Matthew chapter 6, verses 25 and 30 through 34. Matthew chapter 6, verses 25 through 34. Jesus is here explaining that God has every detail, every day of your life. Everything is already planned out. And he says at the end of this verse 34, Matthew 6, 34, he says, you do not have to be anxious about what tomorrow will bring. Just be anxious about what you're doing today. Don't worry about what's happening tomorrow. Today has enough troubles of its own, he says. You need to view anxiousness like it's a big deal. Just like the lazy person needs to view laziness like it's a big deal. If you are an anxious person, I need you to see that you are sinning when you are anxious. You are sinning when you're anxious because what you're doing is you're taking trust off of God and putting trust onto yourself. The same idea of trying to control the future is the anxious person. Anxiousness, I kind of hate that it's this way, but anxiousness is oftentimes seen as like a girl sin, and that's so not the case. I mean, obviously, girls struggle with this sin a lot, but guys struggle with this sin as well, of you being so worried about what tomorrow will bring. God, are you going to take care of me? God, Am I going to have a job one day? God, am I ever going to get married? What's going to happen if I don't? God, what if I don't get into the college that I want to get into? What if I don't make the type of money that I want to make? God, what happens? And you start to freak out and you're anxious. Maybe for some of you right now, that's how you are with your schoolwork. You're anxious about your schoolwork. You spend all of your night studying for your test. And you wake up the next morning, you hop into class, and you're so scared about what grade is going to happen on the other side, and you're so anxious. You work hard and you study hard. That's great. But you're so anxious about what the grade is going to be. The solution here for you is to not get so wrapped up in what's going to happen. Work hard, study hard, and just trust God. That doesn't mean just be comfortable with a bunch of F's on your report card. That's not what this is saying, because it is saying that you need to work hard, study hard. Maybe some of you are anxious about what your grades will get you in the future. Your hard work today, will it pay off for college one day? You get so future-oriented with your grades or with your homework, which can so easily happen, specifically in high school as you start thinking about college. The solution is to remember that God has already chosen your college. God already has your roommate picked out. God already has some of you, your student loan all priced out. God has every little detail of every little thing of your future college life all planned out, every detail to a T. Every second of your college has been perfectly planned out by God. Therefore, you don't have to be God. You can just trust God. Some of you, when you're done with college, you're going to go off into the workplace and you're going to worry so much about the money that you're going to make. And you become so scared about, am I going to have enough money to pay my bills? Am I going to have enough money to move out of my parents' house? Am I going to have enough money to get married one day? Am I going to have enough money? And you become so focused and so anxious of what's going to happen. The solution is right here too. Don't observe the wind and then you don't sow. And he who regards the clouds will not reap. If you're so paralyzed by thinking about the future, it says that you shouldn't worry about that. The solution is, remember, God has your paycheck already planned out. It's already signed. It's already direct deposited in many ways, at least in God's book. And you can just trust God. And subpoint B, you can write it down this way. You can entrust your future to God. Let go of your control of the future, but also entrust that future to God. That's what he says here in verse 5. Verse 5, he explains this, entrusting your future to God. If you look back at Ecclesiastes 11 here with me, it says, "For you do not know the way that the spirit comes into the bones of a woman, into the womb of a woman with child, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything." What he's saying here, you don't know how the intricacies of life within the womb and how God breathes his spirit into that person, how the image of God is wrapped up there in a mom's belly. You don't understand how all of these things, and I hope that one day you get to experience this, where you get to go into the office, when you get to go look on an ultrasound at your future child, and been able to do that a couple times now. It's incredible to see. Wow, all of these little details, every vertebrae in their spine is all perfectly planned out by God, and I can see it. I can see how their brain. I remember one of the ultrasounds. They literally zoom in so tightly at 20 weeks. At 20 weeks to see all four chambers of the heart. God has planned all of those things so intricately out, and it's amazing. How does this happen? God takes care of it. God is the one that is in control of all of it. And therefore, the idea here is, if you don't know how it works for a baby to grow in a mother's womb, which none of us know how that works, it says, therefore, God's smarter than you. You can trust him and not yourself. We are so ignorant compared to God. We're so ignorant compared to God. And it's like a father to a child looking at his son or his daughter and being like, you have no idea what you're doing in your life. You have no clue the dangers that you're doing, no clue the stupidity and foolishness that you're doing. I'm experiencing this right now with Levi. Right now, he's in this phase of like stuffing his food in his hair right now. Right now, it's just so stupid. This was cinnamon rolls this morning. Last night was spaghetti. He was taking marinara sauce and meatballs and just doing this into his hair. And so by the end of dinner, he just looked like he had spiky red hair with meat in it. And it's like, Levi, you are so stupid. Like, what are you doing, dude? And you look at this, and he's got icing all throughout. Like it doesn't look that bad actually. But Karina sent me this morning. He put cinnamon rolls in his hair. Why should a kid not throw their food in their hair? I think there's many reasons. One, if you keep doing that, you're gonna be super weird. But like, two, you smell really bad. Like he smells like meat sauce like all night now because of meatballs in his hair. Like it's disgusting. You got to take now. Like I got to wash him and bathe him like 10 times more than we used to because he's messing up his hair so much. And it's like looking at a child like this and being like, you are making such foolish decisions. And that's how God looks down at us, knowing so much better than every one of us, knowing every detail of everything that we're doing, and says, trust me, stop trying to do it yourself. You're doing foolish things. Do the way that I tell you to do it. You guys remember the story of Job. Job goes through a lot of suffering. And what Job does at near the end of the book of Job is he starts to tell God what God should do. He starts to kind of set himself up as God. And this is what God says at the end of Job. Job 38, verses 3 through 5. I love the way that he addresses Job. This is God talking now. He says, dress for action like a man, which I think is awesome that God stood Job up like that. He says, dress for action like a man. I will question you. You make it known to me. And he says this. God says this to Job. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who has stretched the line upon it? What God is doing here is he's flexing on Job and saying, you have no idea what you're doing. You are not God. You have no clue. You are ignorant. You are stupid. You are foolish. Let me be God, is what God says here in Job 38. It's the same concept as Ecclesiastes 11. Let God be God. Stop trying to tell God what he should do. Well, I don't tell God what he should do. Well, when you try to be anxious about the future, when you try to control your future, what you're doing is you're setting yourself up as God. You need to trust your future to God. And at school, that looks like working hard, trusting God with the results. At work, it looks like working hard and trusting God with the paycheck. At home, it looks like working hard and trusting that God will see you obeying your parents and bless you for it. Working hard and trusting God is what Ecclesiastes chapter 11 tells you to do, and that sets you apart from the non-Christian. Non-Christian, point number one, work wisely. They can do it. Point number two, they can't do it. To trust and to rest in God, to entrust your future to God, to not be anxious, to not try to control and micromanage your future, but to say, God, you are God, and I am not. This is how Ecclesiastes chapter 11 tells us to work like a Christian. So we're going to go off now into small groups and talk about it. So we're going to bow our heads right now. And then we're going to be able to talk and break into small groups here in a second. Bow your heads with me. God, we thank you so much for warning us of what it looks like for us to work. God, it is not every single time that we open up the Bible where it applies so specifically to our certain stage. But God, we thank you tonight for addressing us to say this is how we ought to work with our schoolwork. This is how we ought to work with even our hobbies. This is how we ought to work with our future jobs one day. To work hard, to work diligently, to work consistently and disciplined, but then also to trust you with the future and to trust that whatever happens, you are in control and you will provide and you will take care of us. God, may we cast our bread upon the waters, for you will bring it back to us. May we entrust our future to you, and may you provide for us. God, thank you so much for this warning, for this reminder tonight. Pray as we now go into small groups, we talk about how this applies to our life. God, may you use it to be transformative for our lives, for our school lives, for our home lives, and God, for our future work lives as well. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.